Welcome to Ed Leader with your host, Dr. Rob Jackson. Educational leadership is an ever-evolving opportunity to make a real and lasting difference in the lives of students, parents, and the community. And now, here's your host, Dr. Rob Jackson.
Hi friends, welcome to the Ed Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Jackson, and I want to thank you for spending time with me today. I hope that the podcast is adding value to you and your work. It has been and is my attempt to give back to the profession that has given so much to me. It's not sponsored and there are no commercials. It is simply, I hope, an opportunity to learn from and with other leaders as each of us seek to grow as leaders. If you have not, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast on your podcast player and share it with your network of colleagues and friends. The Ed Leader podcast community continues to grow worldwide because of your kind words and positive ratings. Remember, you can find show notes, links to references that are cited during each episode, and find each of the previous regular episodes and the 3 special leadership series at drrobjackson.com. Speaking of continuing to grow, let's get to it. Today's guest, Dr. Carrie Tulbert, is currently in her 13th year as a middle school principal. She has led schools that truly run the gamut of student populations and sizes. A former North Carolina teaching fellow, Dr. Tulbert is a graduate of Meredith College with her bachelor's degree in English, a master's degree in school administration from Gardner Webb University, and an educational specialist degree and doctoral degree from Wingate University. Her greatest honor is being a mother of 2 sons. She passionately believes in public education and its power to transform students' lives. She also truly believes that being a principal is the best job in education. She is the 2014 North Carolina Principal of the Year, and she served on the Board of Directors for the North Carolina Principals and Assistant Principals Association for 5 years. She's an active facilitator for various NC-PAPA courses and loves learning. Please help me welcome Dr. Carrie Tulbert back to the Ed Leader Podcast. Dr. Carrie Tulbert, welcome back to the Ed Leader Podcast. What an incredible opportunity for me and for our listeners to hear from you and to really learn with and from you. Thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you here, Dr. Jackson. Honor. Thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Carrie, you are one of my heroes in this work and somebody that over time I've really come to consider a close friend, which is a bit ironic because we have never been geographically close in our work. But thanks to the wonders of social media and communication, we've been able to remain close and to encourage each other and share with each other. And so I have watched your career and cheered you on in your career. And I'm just so proud of all the work you do for the students and staff in your building, certainly as well as for principals and administrators across the state. You've become such an authentic voice and a voice that's listened to by ed leaders and by leaders and elected leaders across our state. And I just appreciate your advocacy and your work on behalf of principals. Thank you for just being you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm very passionate about what we get to do every day. And it's just such an honor to serve children and education, especially across the state of North Carolina. And so I appreciate the time to be with you.
I'm appreciative of your time and thank you for sharing. The last time that I had you here on the Ed Leader Podcast, we had 3 of our colleagues, 3 of our fellow former North Carolina State Principals of the Year, and we actually wound up doing a double episode talking about the research on the effect and the importance of the principal and what that means for students. And so I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that episode and appreciate all the wisdom you brought to that conversation. Today, I'd like to, in some ways, further that conversation and in other ways dovetail from that conversation, because I'm sure, like you have noticed, I've noticed that the years of experience, the average years of experience for principals seems to be going down in our profession as we have newer and newer principals coming in, as our colleagues are retiring at an alarming rate, it seems like,
And so today I really want to have the opportunity for us to talk about keeping our bench full and making sure we've got that pipeline filled so that as opportunities for folks to come into the principalship arrive, that we've got folks to step into that role. And so let me kind of back up and start from there just to say, what are you noticing among principals? I know you do a lot of work with our state association, the North Carolina Association, Principal and Assistant Principal Association. What are you noticing in terms of just the principalship and the state of the principalship in general?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, Rob. The state of the principalship is going to directly reflect the state of education and what the education pipeline looks like in anywhere, but especially in the state of North Carolina. I don't want to rehash what we all know, which is the educator pipeline is decreasing and getting narrower and narrower every day. And so that makes me concerned for many reasons, obviously, for our classrooms, but that also means the administrator pipeline is decreasing. And I really feel because of that, that we have certain responsibilities as current administrators, whether, again, you're a central office administrator, a school building administrator, of really encouraging and empowering our current educators, our teachers, about the influence and the job and the role and the responsibilities of being an assistant principal and principal, and being really transparent about what that role looks like and what the principal and assistant principal do to impact education in a positive way. You know, we talked about this in our last podcast, but all the research states that yes, a classroom teacher is the most powerful factor in a student's learning, but right behind that classroom teacher is the school principal, in a very close second. And I've said this many, many times that being an educator, being a classroom teacher is the best job in education, truly, because you're with kids every day. But in my opinion, and you might argue with me on this one, I think the second best job in education is being a principal. And I think we have a responsibility to be positive and share why. Yes, it's a hard job. Yes, there are things that I never thought I would have to do, that I get to do every day. Wonderful things, crazy things, but mostly wonderful because it impacts kids and it helps them have a better learning environment. But all that to say, I think we have a responsibility to protect the role as well as just publicize the role and what the role looks like. And it's something that, as you know, I'm really passionate about is the power of the principal, and not in a positional power mindset, but more of just the impact that a principal can have and how passionately I believe in helping principals see that positive impact and help them be more intentional about that positive impact and be more intentional leaders, and how to really serve their school in a way that can have that powerful impact. And so as I see that educator pipeline decreasing, I see that administrator pipeline decreasing, I'm becoming more passionate about trying to help educate future administrators, therefore teachers, and current assistant principals about what we can do as educational leaders in educational administration. So I think it was a really long answer to your short question, but I'm just really passionate about it. So I hope that's comes out as how important it is and just the passion that I have for helping develop this role and what it can do for kids.
Absolutely. And your passion does come out. And that's why I love talking to you. And I love being able to think with you and learn with you because you are passionate and right to be so. You said I might disagree with you that the principalship is the second best job in education. And truly, I don't think I would disagree with you.
Okay, yeah. Well, I didn't want to say anything disrespectful about your role as a superintendent.
That's right.
I haven't been in your role.
No. I'm not going to diss the superintendency, but I enjoy that. And it's hard to believe I'm in my 9th year now as a superintendent. But often I think back to the decade plus that I spent as a principal and how much I enjoyed that opportunity to interact with students and interact with teachers and feel like I was really making a difference in the building when we could remove barriers and push over obstacles so that teachers could teach and students could learn. And so there certainly is a lot of enjoyment and fulfillment that comes in serving in the role of principal. And you're such a great spokesperson for that role. And again, I appreciate your passionate advocacy for the role. And so as I think about you as principal, certainly I know that there are many opportunities you could have availed yourself of to be in other roles. and you have chosen to be a principal. And that just speaks so much to who you are as a person, as a principal. And I absolutely love that. I'd like to kind of back up and kind of think about or hear from you how you got to the principalship. So at some point you were a teacher in a classroom and you wind up as a principal. What were the steps along the way? What happened to take Mrs. Tulbert at the time, teacher, to Dr. Tulbert, principal? What was it that kind of influenced you along that journey?
That's really a fun question because I sometimes think I didn't take the typical path, although I was a traditionally trained teacher, North Carolina teaching fellow, very proud to be a North Carolina teaching fellow. I've always loved just leadership. I've been exposed to various leadership opportunities since I was a teenager and just have kind of fallen into roles where I've had the ability to work with others and serve others in a leadership capacity. And so somehow I think it was always meant to happen in some way, shape, or form. I was hired as a teacher and I had a wonderful principal that I had the pleasure of working for that I think saw some of that potential. And when I said, hey, can I be a department chair? He was like, sure, no problem. Hey, can I serve on school improvement team? Sure, no problem. And I just, again, saw opportunities where I could maybe make a difference. Even though I was a very young teacher at the time, my principal just said, sure. And he said, yes. And now that I'm a principal, I certainly understand how lovely those volunteers are.
That's right. That's right. That's
So
right.
he might have been desperate. I don't know. I never questioned him on that. But his name is Jim Gagan. He was my principal at Lakeshore Middle School and Iredell Statesville Schools. And he just gave me opportunities. And I certainly appreciate that. And I knew after about 3 years in the classroom, I was like, I want to get my master's degree. And I really wasn't sure what I wanted to get it in. I never had any intention of going into educational administration. I just thought I wanted to teach English for 30 years, but I also wanted to further my education. And so as I studied different routes, I thought, well, school administration will be about leadership. And so I love leadership. Let me just study that and it'll add on to my English degree. And so I just kind of did it on a whim of what master's degree I wanted. Getting my master's was not a whim, but which one I was more of like, well, let me do this because it seems like it might be fun. And so I loved taking my classes, but while I was taking my classes, the more I learned, the more I was like, oh, maybe this is actually a kind of a cool opportunity to look into one day. And so one day came very quickly with an opportunity actually to serve in a central office role. After 5 years of teaching, I had another amazing leader that just gave me a chance and said, all right, Carrie, you can step into this role. And I got to step into a professional development kind of director type position in curriculum and instruction. And in that position, I worked with 38 schools and 38 principals. And so when I worked with those 38 principals, I learned so much from them. And I kept thinking, how cool, how cool do they get to serve the teachers? And I kept seeing teachers need someone to serve them. And I thought, that would be really awesome. And I had no idea what I was getting into. But after being in the district role and serving 38 schools, I thought, I want to be back in one school, but I want to serve in a leadership role. And so again, just through some great people that believed in me, I was able to land an assistant principal role at my former middle school, Mooresville Middle School in Mooresville, North Carolina. And I thought, well, this will be fun. It's the school I went to. It's the teachers that taught me. And goodness, I had no idea what I was getting into, but it was a blast. I served as an assistant principal for 2 years. And then again, the interim principal position came open mid-year. And I went to my superintendent and I said, hey, can I do it? And he was like, I don't know. And thankfully, again, the superintendent said, sure, after I'm sure a lot of debate, and again, granted me an opportunity to serve as an interim principal to kind of prove myself. And I still had to interview for the real principalship per se, but then got the job in my first principalship. But as an assistant principal, I you kind of asked me this beforehand of to think about some of the things that made a difference for me as an assistant principal. And I served under one principal. His name was Rick Reynolds. He's now a superintendent in Ohio. I just talked with him this morning, ironically. But Rick taught me his most powerful lesson truly was how to be a school administrator and still love kids. And I know that sounds crazy, but I had never really had that modeled for me. I knew as a classroom teacher how to love kids because I felt like that's the easy part of being an educator, but I wasn't sure what that looked like as a school administrator, when you're in charge of the stereotypical butts and buses. And I learned just by watching Rick and seeing him interact with children, and he loves kids. He still loves kids, which just makes him such a powerful educational leader even now. But Rick taught me what that looked like, and it made me feel even more passionate about that role because you can still love kids and show how to love kids and lead by example, even as an assistant principal, and show what that kid love looks like when you're leading a PLC through a process of curriculum realignment. Just things like that, again, I just never really thought about since I did have limited experience. I was only a teacher for 5 years. I served in central office for almost 2 years. And then I was an assistant principal for 2 years. So by the time I became a principal, I didn't even have 10 years of educational experience. And I'm not recommending that by any means, because it certainly presented its challenges. And I still feel like I need to write an apology letter to Mooresville Middle School for dealing with me as a first year principal and what all the challenges look like for them. But we made it together. And they taught me much more than I taught them. But I really loved, as an assistant principal, still being able to be with kids. And I still think that's something that school administrators have to be intentional about. And sometimes we lose focus about, and I say that again, being self-critical sometimes too. I know that it can happen to the best of us when we get overwhelmed with other responsibilities. But I think just all of that, to answer your original question of how did I end up where I am, I've had just wonderful people that said yes, when I asked, hey, can I do this? And they said, sure. And again, I love leadership. I've always been intrigued by it since I was the drum major in my high school marching band. I just wanted to teach and I wanted to lead. And I just think it was a gift that I've just been thankfully given that I still love. So.
And I tell you what, and that comes across, and, shout out to all those folks you named who said yes. There's so much power that we have in the opportunity to say yes. We can't always say yes every time, but when we can say yes, even when sometimes yes is harder than the no, it really does make a difference in people's lives. And so I'm so grateful they said yes. It occurs to me, Carrie, that, and there's a reason that you became the state principal of the year. Clearly, you are an amazing educational leader. You're an amazing leader. It occurs to me, though, that you have a lot of courage and a lot of confidence, which have served you well. And that's awesome. I'm sure that just like me, you've also met and interacted with teachers who had the leadership gene that were clearly destined to be great leaders in a building, but may not have had the confidence to step forward and say, may I be on the grade level chair, or may I be on the school improvement team, or may I possibly serve as an administrator? And it seems like quite a few principals have shared with me that they didn't realize that maybe they would be good at that until somebody came along. And so I wonder, as you work with teachers and you see someone who might have what it takes to be a great administrator, how do you wake them up to that notion if they don't realize it in themselves? Or what do you do with teachers to encourage them along the pathway even before they might become an assistant principal?
That's an awesome question. I think a lot of it is in the power of our questions. I read somewhere as a young educator just how much more powerful our questions are than our answers. And so I feel like as an educational leader at the building level anywhere, and really leader any level, is just asking the right questions. And so when I do see potential in an educator to be anything from a grade level chair to a department chair to a school administrator, I just ask the questions like, hey, have you ever thought about being grade level chair? Or have you ever thought about this? And then I tell them why that it came to my mind, that I see this in you. And I think that's really important to let them know what you do see, because our eyes don't always see those things. And again, even though I asked the question, I asked to be a part of things, and those other leaders I mentioned said yes, they also usually said yes. And eventually I heard why they said yes. I maybe didn't hear it in that initial, but I certainly appreciate that why. And that's something that I do want to bring attention to, is the importance of that why, because not only do you and I have to know that every day in front of us, why we're doing what we're doing, but that importance of transparency as a leader, especially as we develop other leaders, of explaining to them the why and being transparent, whether it be about who they are as a leader, or why we make a particular decision, or why we think that they would make a great school administrator. And I also think, again, another more power to that is being so positive about what we do. I think sometimes as assistant principals and principals, we get bogged down in the stress. And I hear so many teachers say, I don't know how principals do what they do. It just seems like such a hard job. And I've heard some teachers say, but Carrie, you make it look so easy. And I'm like, oh, no. It's not easy, but I love it. So that makes a difference when you love what you do. But I've heard other teachers say, well, I worry about my principal because they seem stressed all the time and they don't seem to enjoy what they're doing. And that's where I think, as principals and assistant principals, we have to be transparent about what we enjoy and why, because that helps encourage other people to say, hey, it really is a great job. It's not as stressful as it may seem. Now, granted, COVID took us all in a whole different realm that now I feel more like a normal principal, whereas the last 2 years, and I'm sure that you feel this too, I didn't feel like a normal principal per se. I mean, this is my 12th school year as a school principal, and now it starts to feel more like normal again. So we were all under some duress for a while there, everywhere from custodians to school nutritionists to teacher assistants to teachers to principals, superintendents, boards of education. So I just think we've got to be transparent about why we love what we do. And that helps encourage others to see, hey, it can be a great opportunity. And when you do see that quality in them, to ask the question and then tell them why you asked the question.
Absolutely. And that's so very important. That feedback is crucial, right? It's critical that folks hear that feedback, and it gives them the opportunity, and reflecting on an opportunity that you may have suggested, to think about, well, why may I be successful in that? Because folks don't want to do something they're not going to be successful in. And when we reflect back to them, I have seen in you this, that's why I think this would be a good idea, then they grow in their own confidence, and sometimes are willing to take a step that they may not have thought of. Mm-hmm. Now, in a similar fashion, you and I both had short tenures as assistant principals. I think you mentioned about 2 years, and there was a time as an interim principal. I was assistant principal for about 18 months, and there was a time as an interim principal in an elementary school. And so there's quite a bit that we missed out on because our tenure as an assistant principal was quite short. And so thinking about assistant principals and really speaking to principals, what are those things that principals should be trying to do, or opportunities principals should be trying to give, or challenges principals should be making to and for assistant principals to help them grow in the role, to be as prepared as possible? Because back in the day, when you and I became principals, it was not very often that folks became a principal with a short tenure as assistant principal. That's more the case today because the pipeline isn't as full as it used to be. And so our assistant principals, their time as assistant principal is so very precious. So what would you say to principals, or some of the things we need to be doing with our assistant principals to help prepare them for the principalship?
Oh, that's such a good question. Again, having only served as an assistant principal for 2 years, I don't remember those 2 years very well. But as I look to my role every day and think about my role as a mentor to an assistant principal, I've had the pleasure of working with, I don't even know how many, but at least 10 different assistant principals in my 12 years as a principal. And they've all been so different and so wonderful to work with, and learned from each of them in different ways. But I did ask my current assistant principal kind of like, well, what makes a difference for you? And her name is Lisa Brooks, and she's just been wonderful to work with. We're in our second year working together. And Lisa said, and again, part of this was just things that she appreciated about our working relationship. But she said that one of the things that's helped her the most is to be exposed to different opportunities, not just operational, but instructional opportunities, crucial conversations. And I think that's really key for any assistant principal, is that you put yourself into situations where you're exposed to different things, or you ask your principal, hey, can I do this? And even though I used my example of, hey, can I do this? Hey, can I do this? Like, I think that again shows that initiative that you want to learn and serve in whatever way you can. I'm a true believer in servant leadership, and wherever you get placed, you just serve and you do your very, very best in that role. And so as an assistant principal, you're asking to just be exposed to different things. And so I think operational, instructional, facility management, leading where you are in that moment. And I would also say that as an assistant principal, exposing yourself to different levels, I say that being critical. I wish I had been an assistant principal at a different level, as in elementary or high. Most of my administrative career has been in middle school. And so I wish there had been some opportunities for me to serve at elementary or high. So currently, my current assistant principal, again, who shows great initiative, she has served for principal of the day at other schools when a principal has been out. And it's been a great opportunity for her just to see different school situations and learn from different people that she can learn from. And I think that's key as an assistant principal is, although you may be like, I worked for one principal as an assistant principal, and I'm so thankful. He was a wonderful principal and he taught me so much. I think also that power of seeking out help and exposure to other leaders is really important. Although I did work very closely with my principal and I learned so much from him, I also had a mentor in my school district that did not work with me every day. And that was really powerful because they were in a different school. And granted, that mentor was kind of a self-proclaimed mentor. His name is Todd Wirt. And I know you know him, Rob.
I do.
An amazing
Phenomenal leader.
Yes. And that was a huge blessing to me that we developed such a great relationship, that he was my mentor outside of my school. And again, I just had somebody that I could learn from in addition to my current principal. So I think as an assistant principal, you jump on opportunities to expose yourself to different types of leadership and different situations where you can see, oh, okay, this is how I can adapt my leadership style to this, whatever it may be, so that you can, again, just be in different types of situations. Because as a principal, you're in it and you're in all of it. And I often say the principal is the jack of all trades, the master of none. And so you have to be exposed to a variety of situations. So I think as principals right now, we have a huge responsibility to expose our assistant principal to anything and everything that we possibly can, knowing that we're still the principal, but to expose our assistant principal to a conference situation with a parent or a decision-making process that you're a part of, inviting them to be a part of any advisory committee that's possible that serves the district level or even the school level. Sometimes I worry that I'm like putting too much on my assistant principal, like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that, so that you need to do that. And I worry, like, is she going to think that I'm like doing nothing? And then I'm asking her to do everything. But again, that why is really important. And she even shared with me, she was like, Carrie, explaining that why as a principal is helpful. So even when I ask my assistant principal to do something, we talk through the why of why I ask her to do that, or why I feel like it's important that she does that. And then there's situations like crucial conversations that she may not be, quote, ready for, but I feel like it's my job to help her prepare for that, because as a principal, that's what you do all the time. And so talking through that conversation of what that looks like and how she should mold and shape that conversation so that students are winning in the end and learning in the end. And even if it's a conversation with a teacher or a conversation with a student, what that conversation needs to look like, and we shape it together. And then she goes and she has it individually. I think just a lot of being a principal is empowerment of your assistant principal. And it's not just encouraging, but really empowering, where your teaching becomes their doing. And I used this example last week with our DLP group with NC Papa, but, you know, we all think about when we empower, how hard that is. You know, it's hard to delegate. And I still struggle with that. But I often try to remember, okay, the empowerment is really like teaching a kid how to ride a bike, and I'm sure, I know you've done that, Rob, with your boys. And I think about, that first time you're with them, you assume the position, you have your left hand on the handlebar, your right hand under the seat, and you're like, all right, let's do this. And I feel like as principals, that's kind of what we're doing with assistant principals, is that they got their training wheels on, but you're going to help guide them in the beginning of that process. But then you're going to eventually let go of one hand, and you're going to keep holding on with your right hand. And then eventually you let go with that. And they might, like, just like when I'm teaching my little son, Luke, to ride his bike, he looks back at me and he's like, whoa, you let go, fall. I think every kid sometimes does that. That look
right.
back in surprise, like, wait a minute, you didn't tell me you were going to let go. Or you did, but I forgot you were. And he goes down and boom. Well, the same thing's going to happen with an assistant principal. They're going to fall down and go boom. I know when I was an assistant principal, I fell down daily in some way, shape, or form. But Rick, my principal, helped get me back up, and he helped support me, and he put those handlebars and that position back in place. And then my other mentor, Todd, helped do the same thing. He might not have seen me do it like Rick did, but Todd could also talk me through it as a follow-up, and also just to hear different perspectives. And so as principals, we're teaching our assistant principals how to ride a bike. And it's that same process of gradually following with them, and then letting go, and then letting them fall maybe, but then going back and helping to pick them up. And we still put our hand back on the handlebar, and we still put our hand under the seat, and we push them again, but then we still have to gradually release and let them go. And so I think as principals that we have to be very intentional about that, because it's not our go-to. We didn't go into the position to delegate everything. That's not why we're doing it, but that's part of our responsibility as principals, is to help others grow and empower them. And one of the most important people that we have that responsibility to is our assistant principal. If we have an assistant principal, I know not all principals do, but most of us do. So I hope that was probably a long way of answering again your question.
No, that was beautiful, Carrie. And as you were talking about this metaphor of teaching a child to ride their bike, I was certainly thinking about teaching my sons to ride their bike, but then continuing that thought of thinking about my dad teaching me how to ride a bike, and then later I'm teaching my son how to ride a bike. And so often in this work, we may be helping our assistant principals today learn to ride the bike of the principalship and being the building leader. But we know that the time will come when they're teaching the next generation. And we want to continue that because our schools continue to need incredible principals. But I heard you say some really important things that I want to kind of highlight a bit so that we don't miss them. One, I heard you really talking about being purposeful in finding and creating those opportunities for assistant principals to grow as leaders. You talked about helping them practice before they went into the situation, whether that's the fake conversation to get ready for the parent, or to allow them to talk about what they're going to do in a presentation to teachers in a PLC, but they had that opportunity to practice. And then I think there's also a piece to protecting that opportunity, because so often, and you alluded to the pandemic earlier, and I was hoping I wouldn't talk a whole lot about the pandemic this year, but certainly we learned from it. But in the pandemic, we were under the gun of the tyranny of the urgent. There were so many things that had to be done that we were hard pressed to get to the important. And too often the urgent trumps the important. And we know that can happen with our assistant principals. A bus driver is suddenly out and we need to find a bus driver, or there's a child that needs to be escorted from a classroom, and it's so automatic to grab the assistant principal. But if we've created or want to create an opportunity for the assistant principal to do this leadership activity, and then they're called away from it, they miss the opportunity. And so sometimes we have to protect that opportunity as principals by stepping back in to say, okay, I'm going to get the student this time, or I'm going to find the bus driver this time, so you can do that. So I really think that purposeful planning of opportunities, giving them the practice before they do it, and then protecting that time is just so very, 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 very critical. In our conversation, we've really talked about, especially our earlier conversation, the importance of principals. We've talked about preparing assistant principals, and we understand that often you just can't do everything and be ready to step in as principal day one, because the principalship is so broad in terms of all the different things that can happen in the course of a morning, much less a day. And so we do our very best to prepare folks, and we do our very best to find the folks to prepare. And I'm so glad that there were those in your life and your career who said yes, because so many of us have benefited because they did say yes, and you've had the opportunities you've had. And I appreciate all the opportunities that you create for others. I know that many of our principals have learned from you as you've presented in the programs through NC and others, and I've certainly learned from you. I want to say thank you for spending time with us. You're such an incredible leader and such an incredible blessing to ed leaders everywhere. Dr. Tulbert, thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
I hope that you enjoyed our time together with Dr. Carrie Tulbert. The pathway to the principalship is paved with passion, purpose, planning, and practice. I'm interested in your thoughts. Please keep sharing your feedback on Twitter at Dr._Rob_Jackson, through email, or by commenting directly on the show notes page. If you think this has been helpful, please share the episode and podcast with your network of friends and colleagues. Thank you for spending time with me today, and thank you for all that you do for every student, every teacher, and every staff member. You are making a difference. If no one else has told you, I want you to know that I believe in you. Good day.
Thank you for listening to the Ed Leader Podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and consider leaving a review with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts so that we may continue to grow the Ed Leader community. We hope that you have enjoyed your time with Dr. Jackson. Until next time.